I'm Olivia Chin, 28, and I just blew up my entire family dynamic with a single Facebook post. The family group chat has exploded. My phone won't stop buzzing with relatives taking sides. My mother hasn't spoken to me in 3 weeks. My sister's wedding has been postponed indefinitely. And the shocking part? I don't regret a single word I wrote. Sometimes family loyalty isn't about staying silent, it's about finally speaking the truth. Before I dive into this wild family revenge drama, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. If you enjoy real-life family drama with satisfying karma, hit that like button right now and subscribe to catch more stories where justice gets served. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how this family favoritism situation explodes in the most unexpected way. Growing up in suburban Connecticut, it became clear very early on that there were two distinct roles in the Chin household. My sister Melissa was the golden child, and I was, well, the other one. Our parents, immigrants who had worked tirelessly to build a successful real estate business, had very different expectations for their two daughters. Melissa was groomed to be the family success story. Everything about her was celebrated: her straight A's, her popularity in school, her acceptance to Yale, and later, her high-powered corporate attorney position. Family gatherings inevitably turned into Melissa appreciation sessions, with relatives cooing over her latest achievements while I sat in the corner, nursing my drink and forcing a smile. I wasn't unsuccessful by any normal standard. I had graduated with honors from Boston University with a degree in education, secured a stable teaching position at a respected public high school, and even won Teacher of the Year in my district. But in the Chin family hierarchy, teaching was considered a settling profession, something you did when you couldn't achieve something more prestigious. Teachers are important, but they don't make real money, my father would say dismissively whenever my career came up in conversation. Not like lawyers or doctors. The disparity in how we were treated extended beyond just verbal acknowledgement. Every milestone in my life was acknowledged with polite indifference, while Melissa's achievements were celebrated with lavish parties and expensive gifts. When I bought my first car, a used Honda that I had saved for years to afford, my parents nodded approvingly and said, "That's sensible." When Melissa got her first big case, they surprised her with a brand new BMW. "It's an investment in her image," my mother explained when I questioned the extravagance. A successful attorney needs to look the part. The pattern continued as we moved into adulthood. When I got engaged to my boyfriend Nathan, a fellow teacher, my parents' response was lukewarm at best. They attended our modest wedding, but complained about the simplicity of the venue for months afterward. When Melissa started dating Richard, the son of a prominent banking family, my parents practically adopted him on the spot. They took the couple on luxury vacations, invited them to their country club, and made it clear that Richard was the son they never had. "You've made such a perfect match," my mother gushed to Melissa at a family dinner. "Richard comes from the right kind of family." That's so important. I caught Nathan's eye across the table, both of us registering the implication. My husband, apparently, was not from the right kind of family. Over the years, I tried to convince myself that I had imagined the favoritism. Maybe I was just being oversensitive. Maybe I was jealous of my sister's success. Maybe I needed to work harder to earn my parents' approval. I went to therapy, trying to process these feelings without disrupting family harmony. My therapist, Dr. Lavish, gently suggested that what I was experiencing might be a common dynamic in immigrant families, where one child is designated to fulfill the parent's dreams while the other is somewhat overlooked. "But it doesn't make it any less painful," she reminded me. "Your feelings are valid, Olivia." Still, I kept quiet. I smiled through family gatherings where Melissa was showered with attention. I defended my parents when friends pointed out how differently they treated us. I convinced myself that family peace was worth the price of my own feelings. They had such a hard life before coming to America, I would tell Nathan when he expressed outrage on my behalf. They just want to see their sacrifices validated through Melissa's success. But as we approached our 30s, the disparity became harder to ignore. When Melissa and Richard got engaged, my parents threw them an engagement party at the country club that cost more than my entire wedding. They offered to pay for a destination wedding in the Maldives, something they had never even considered for Nathan and me. "Your wedding was nice," my mother said dismissively when I finally worked up the courage to point out the difference. "We gave you what we could afford at the time. We're doing better now." The problem was, they had been doing better for years before my wedding. They just hadn't chosen to spend their money on me. Nathan watched me struggle with this dynamic, offering support but ultimately respecting that these were my battles to fight. "I just hate seeing you hurt," he would say after particularly difficult family gatherings. "You deserve so much better." I knew he was right, but I wasn't ready to confront the situation head-on. I continued to attend family events, continued to congratulate Melissa on her successes, continued to pretend that everything was fine. After all, what would be gained by speaking up? Family was family, and some patterns were too deeply entrenched to change. Or so I thought, until that fateful Christmas morning when the contrast between how my sister and I were valued became impossible to ignore and set in motion a chain of events that would change our family forever. Last Christmas started like any other in recent years. Nathan and I drove 3 hours through holiday traffic to reach my parents' sprawling colonial home in Connecticut. We brought carefully wrapped gifts, a handcrafted leather wallet for my father, an expensive bottle of perfume for my mother, and a set of artisanal cooking oils for Melissa and Richard, who would be joining us for dinner. The house was decked out in tasteful holiday decorations, the scent of my mother's famous 5-spice duck wafting from the kitchen. Christmas music played softly in the background as we exchanged awkward hugs in the foyer. My father immediately asked about Nathan's job prospects, despite knowing full well that he was happy as a high school science teacher, while my mother ushered us into the living room where the tree stood, surrounded by packages. "Melissa and Richard will be here any minute," she announced, checking her watch. "We'll wait for them before opening gifts." Predictably, when my sister and her fiancé arrived 30 minutes later, the energy in the room shifted. My parents rushed to greet them, exclaiming over Melissa's new haircut and Richard's recent promotion. We were ushered to the dining room for an elaborate lunch, during which my parents peppered the couple with questions about their wedding plans and Richard's work, while Nathan and I sat quietly, occasionally attempting to join the conversation only to be interrupted or ignored. "The venue in the Maldives is absolutely perfect," my mother gushed. "Private beach, luxury accommodations for all the important guests." "Important guests?" I echoed before I could stop myself. "You know, Richard's family has connections to several prominent politicians and business leaders," my mother explained, as if I had asked a genuine question rather than pointed out her tactless wording. After lunch, we gathered around the Christmas tree for the gift exchange. My father, playing Santa, distributed the presents with obvious excitement. Nathan and I had spent considerable time selecting thoughtful gifts that fit within our teacher's budget. My parents opened theirs with polite appreciation, though I noticed my mother's perfume was quickly set aside when Melissa and Richard presented her with a designer handbag. Then came Melissa's turn. My father handed her a large box with a gleaming red bow. "This is just a little something to celebrate your engagement and upcoming partnership at the firm," he said, beaming with pride. Melissa tore open the wrapping paper and gasped dramatically. Inside was a Gucci handbag, the latest design, recognizable from its distinctive pattern and gold hardware. "Oh my God!" she squealed, holding it up for everyone to see. "I can't believe you got this. It's the exact one I wanted." "Only the best for our star," my mother said, reaching over to squeeze Melissa's hand. "You deserve it." Richard whistled appreciatively. "That's the limited edition they just released. Must have set you back at least $4,000. My parents didn't even blink at the mention of the price. $4,300 for a purse. That was more than Nathan and I spent on 3 months of rent. Now, my father said, turning to me with noticeably less enthusiasm, "Here's something for you, Olivia." He handed me a small envelope. For a moment, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe it was a gift card for a nice restaurant, or tickets to the Broadway show I'd been hinting at wanting to see. Maybe, just maybe, they had remembered that I existed too. I carefully opened the envelope and pulled out a Christmas card. A simple, mass-produced Christmas card with a generic winter scene on the front. Inside, my mother had written, "Merry Christmas, Olivia and Nathan. Wishing you all the best. Love, Mom and Dad." That was it. No gift card. No check. No tickets. Just a card that had probably cost all of $2 at the local pharmacy. The room fell silent. I looked up to find Richard staring at the floor uncomfortably. Nathan had gone rigid beside me. Melissa was too busy admiring her new bag to notice the awkwardness. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice surprisingly steady despite the lump forming in my throat. "Well, we know you and Nathan prefer simple things," my mother said breezily. "And you always say experiences matter more than possessions." It was true, I had said that. But the card contained no experience, no meaningful sentiment, not even a personal message. It was just nothing. A placeholder. An afterthought. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. A $4,300 designer handbag for Melissa, a $2 card for me. As we continued with the gift exchange, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about the presents. This was about a lifetime of being treated as less than, of having my achievements minimized, my choices criticized, my worth diminished. This was about my parents making it abundantly clear, yet again, that I was not a priority in their lives. The rest of Christmas Day passed in a blur. I went through the motions, helping with dishes, making polite conversation, smiling for photos. But inside, something had broken. The carefully constructed justifications I had built over the years, they're from a different generation, they show love differently, they had harder expectations for themselves, all came crumbling down. On the drive home, Nathan was uncharacteristically quiet. Finally, as we crossed the state line back into Massachusetts, he spoke. "That was cruel, what they did today," he said quietly. "Not just thoughtless. Cruel." I stared out the window at the passing highway lights, tears streaming down my face. It's always been this way. No, Liv, it's gotten worse. And you don't deserve it. No one deserves to be treated that way by their own parents. That night, lying awake in our cozy apartment, I replayed not just the day's events, but a lifetime of similar moments. The missed dance recitals when I was young. The lukewarm response to my college acceptance, while Melissa's had warranted a catered party. The way they had contributed significantly to Melissa's down payment on her luxury condo, but had offered only advice when Nathan and I were house hunting. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of the hurt, the rejection, the unfairness. And beneath that hurt, I discovered something unexpected: anger. Pure, righteous anger. Why had I accepted this treatment for so long? Why had I made excuses for people who consistently showed me I wasn't valued? Why had I maintained the facade of a happy family when the reality was so different? As the first light of dawn filtered through our bedroom curtains, I made a decision. I was done being the family doormat. I was done pretending everything was fine. I was done protecting people who had never protected me. This was the last Christmas I would spend feeling like an afterthought in my own family. Something had to change, and that something was going to be me. The weeks following Christmas were a blur of emotional turbulence. I returned to work as winter break ended, throwing myself into teaching with renewed vigor. My classroom had always been a sanctuary where I felt valued and in control. But underneath my professional composure, something was simmering. Each night, I would come home and find myself unable to focus on normal activities. I'd pick up a book only to put it down again, start watching a show only to realize I hadn't absorbed a single scene. Nathan noticed the change in me, but gave me space, sensing that I was processing something important. I'm here when you want to talk, he said simply, bringing me cups of tea and taking over household chores without being asked. 3 weeks after Christmas, Melissa called. This was unusual in itself. Our communication typically happened in the family group chat or at mandatory gatherings. My sister rarely reached out just to talk. "Hey Liv," she said, her voice bright with excitement. "Guess what? Mom and Dad are helping us upgrade our wedding package. We're going to have a private island excursion for the wedding party the day before the ceremony." Isn't that amazing? I gripped my phone tightly, saying nothing. "Liv? Are you there?" "I'm here," I managed. "Anyway, I wanted to ask if you could take 2 weeks off work instead of just the one for the wedding. We're extending the trip, and Mom thinks it would look weird if my only sister left early." My only sister. As if I had somehow chosen this relationship. "I don't think I can take 2 weeks, Melissa. We have end-of-year testing right after I'd be getting back." She sighed dramatically. "Can't someone else handle that? This is my wedding, Olivia. It's the most important day of my life." Something snapped inside me. Actually, it's several days, apparently. And no, I can't just abandon my students during critical testing because you've decided to extend your luxury vacation. There was a shocked silence on the other end. I had never spoken to Melissa this way before. "What is wrong with you?" she finally asked. "You sound bitter." "Bitter?" I laughed, a hollow sound that surprised even me. Why would I be bitter? Just because our parents are spending what probably amounts to my annual salary on your wedding while they gave me a $2 Christmas card? Just because they've consistently treated you like royalty and me like an obligation? Why would that make me bitter? "That's not fair," Melissa protested. "It's not my fault they're generous with me." Generous. The word struck me as so inadequate, so sanitized. "Melissa, they've spent our entire lives making it clear that you matter and I don't. That's not generosity, that's favoritism. And you've been happy to benefit from it without ever once acknowledging it or standing up for me." "You're being dramatic," she said dismissively. "If you're jealous of my success." "I'm not jealous of your success," I interrupted, my voice rising. "I'm hurt by the blatant inequality in how we've been treated. There's a difference." "Well, maybe if you had chosen a more ambitious path." "Like what? Like following the exact career they selected for you? Like dating only men they approve of? Like living my entire life according to their narrow definition of success?" The conversation devolved from there. Years of unspoken resentment poured out of me while Melissa alternated between defensive counterattacks and attempts to dismiss my feelings as simple jealousy. We ended the call with nothing resolved, both of us angry and hurt. That night, I couldn't sleep. The conversation with Melissa kept replaying in my head, along with a lifetime of similar dynamics. By morning, I felt physically ill with the weight of it all. I called in sick to work, something I rarely did, and spent the day in bed, alternating between crying and staring blankly at the ceiling. Nathan came home early, concerned about me. He sat on the edge of the bed and took my hand. "Talk to me, Liv. What's going on?" And so I did. I told him everything, not just about the call with Melissa, but about all the years of feeling less than, of making excuses, of swallowing my hurt to keep the peace. Once I started talking, I couldn't stop. It was as if a dam had broken. "I feel like I've been gaslighting myself," I concluded, exhausted from the emotional purge. Telling myself it wasn't that bad, that I was overreacting, that family is family and I should just accept it. But Nathan, I don't think I can anymore. I don't think I should. He listened without interrupting, his eyes full of compassion and, increasingly, anger on my behalf. "You're right," he said when I finally fell silent. "You shouldn't accept it. No one should have to earn their parents' love or respect. That's supposed to be unconditional. So what do I do?" I asked, feeling simultaneously drained and oddly liberated by having spoken my truth out loud. "Whatever you need to do to protect your peace," he said simply. "I've got your back, whatever you decide." That night, after Nathan had gone to sleep, I sat at our kitchen table with my laptop open, a blank document staring back at me. Without fully planning what I was going to write, I began typing. All the thoughts and feelings I'd suppressed for years flowed onto the page, not in a messy, emotional rant, but in a clear, factual account of my experience as the less favored child. I wrote about the Christmas card incident in detail. I wrote about the disparities in how our achievements were celebrated. I wrote about the financial support that had always been available to Melissa, but somehow never to me. I wrote about the constant comments minimizing my career choice and my husband. When I finished, I had written nearly 2,000 words. I read it over, making small edits for clarity, but leaving the emotional honesty intact. Then, without giving myself time to reconsider, I copied the entire text and pasted it into a Facebook post. I made it public, tagged my family members, and hit post. Then I closed my laptop, took a deep breath, and went to bed. The die was cast. There would be no going back to the way things were, and that, I realized as I drifted off to sleep, was exactly what I wanted. Hey everyone, can you believe we're already halfway through this family drama? I'd love to know if any of you have experienced similar family dynamics in your own lives. Have you ever had to confront unfair treatment from parents or siblings? Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts so far. If you're enjoying this journey of family revelations and long overdue confrontations, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories of standing up for yourself. Stay tuned. The most explosive part of this family saga is coming up next. I woke up the next morning to my phone vibrating itself, nearly off the nightstand. Bleary-eyed, I picked it up to find 47 missed calls, over 100 text messages, and countless Facebook notifications. For a brief, disoriented moment, I couldn't remember why. Then it all came rushing back, the post, my public airing of our family's dirty laundry, my decision to finally speak my truth. Nathan stirred beside me. "What's going on?" he mumbled, still half asleep. "It started," I said simply, showing him my phone screen. He sat up immediately, fully awake now. "Are you okay?" Was I? I took a moment to check in with myself. My heart was racing, and my stomach felt tight with anxiety, but underneath those physical reactions was something unexpected: relief. A profound sense of relief that I had finally stopped pretending. "I think I am," I answered honestly. "But it's going to be a rough day." That was an understatement. The reactions to my post fell into distinct categories. First were the shocked responses from extended family members who had never noticed or had willfully ignored the disparity in how Melissa and I were treated. Cousins, aunts, and uncles I rarely spoke to were suddenly messaging me with variations of "I had no idea" and "Why didn't you say something sooner?" Then came the defensive reactions from my mother's side of the family. My maternal grandmother, who had always openly preferred Melissa, left a scathing comment about how airing family business in public is shameful and how I was always too sensitive. Several aunts and uncles echoed the sentiment, focusing on my method of communication rather than the content of what I had shared. The third category was perhaps the most surprising: messages of support and similar stories from more distant relatives and family friends who had observed the dynamic from afar but never felt it was their place to intervene. My father's younger brother, Uncle David, who lived across the country and whom we rarely saw, sent me a private message that brought tears to my eyes. "Olivia, I've watched this happen to you for years and regret never speaking up. Your parents did the same to me and my brother growing up. He was the golden child. I was the scapegoat. It's a toxic pattern that repeats through generations until someone is brave enough to name it. You did the right thing. Call me if you need to talk." My parents' reaction was both predictable and devastating. My mother called 16 times in a row before sending a text that simply read, "Take that post down immediately. You have no idea the damage you're causing." My father, who rarely communicated directly with me, sent an email with the subject line, "Disappointment." The body contained just one line: "I expected better from a daughter we sacrificed everything to raise." Melissa's response came in the form of a counterpost, a lengthy defense of our parents that painted me as ungrateful, entitled, and jealous of her success. She carefully avoided addressing any of the specific incidents I had mentioned, instead focusing on all the ways our parents had supported both of us over the years, conveniently glossing over the massive disparities in that support. Our parents gave us everything they could, she wrote. They worked themselves to the bone to provide opportunities for us. If Olivia chose not to make the most of those opportunities, that's hardly their fault. The most unexpected reaction came from Richard, Melissa's fiancé. While Melissa was publicly defending our parents, Richard sent me a private message. For what it's worth, I've noticed it too. The way they treat you versus Melissa. It's not right, and I've tried to talk to Melissa about it, but she doesn't see it. I'm sorry about the Christmas card thing. That was particularly cruel. I showed Nathan the message, surprised. I always thought he was just as bad as the rest of them, I admitted. Maybe he's not as invested in the family mythology, Nathan suggested. He can see it more objectively. As the day wore on, the messages continued to pour in. Friends from college and work expressed support, some sharing similar stories of family dynamics they had experienced. A few of my more distant relatives took sides, either condemning me for my disrespect or praising my courage. The post was being shared and commented on far beyond my immediate circle, touching a nerve with people I had never even met. By evening, the situation had escalated further. My mother sent a group text to the entire extended family announcing that she was taking a break from social media due to Olivia's hurtful and false accusations, and asking everyone to respect our privacy during this difficult time. The irony of her suddenly wanting privacy after years of publicly celebrating Melissa while ignoring me was not lost on me. Melissa called again, this time in tears. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she demanded. "Mom is devastated. Dad hasn't spoken all day. Grandma Chen is talking about canceling her trip for the wedding." "I'm sorry they're upset," I said, surprising myself with how calm I felt. "But I'm not sorry I told the truth." "It's your version of the truth," she snapped. "And you chose the most public, most humiliating way possible to share it. Would you have listened if I'd done it privately?" I asked. "Would any of you have actually heard me?" Her silence was answer enough. The next day, my father broke his silence with a lengthy email. Unlike my mother's emotional reactions, his was coldly logical, attempting to refute each of my examples with explanations that only served to confirm the pattern I had identified. "We gave Melissa a more expensive car because her job required her to make a certain impression," he wrote. "We contributed to her down payment because property in her neighborhood was an investment opportunity. We celebrated her academic achievements because she was pursuing a career path with significant earning potential." He never once addressed the emotional impact of these decisions on me. Never acknowledged how it felt to be consistently valued less than my sister. His email concluded with what he clearly thought was a generous offer. "If you remove your post and issue a public apology to your mother, sister, and me, we can discuss ways to move forward as a family. Otherwise, I'm afraid you leave us no choice but to distance ourselves until you come to your senses." It was meant as a threat, but as I read those words, all I felt was a strange sense of power. For the first time in my life, I was being offered a clear choice rather than simply being expected to accept whatever scraps of attention and affection my parents deigned to offer. "They're trying to blackmail you," Nathan said when I showed him the email. "Emotional blackmail." "I know," I replied. "But it's not going to work anymore." I drafted a reply that was brief but firm. "I'm not removing the post, and I won't be apologizing for telling the truth. If you ever want to have a real conversation about why I felt the need to write it in the first place, I'm open to that. Until then, I think some distance might be healthy for all of us." The fallout continued to ripple outward. Melissa called to inform me that she and Richard were postponing their wedding until this family crisis is resolved. Several relatives who had initially expressed support for me reported receiving angry calls from my mother, pressuring them to take the right side. The family WhatsApp group, usually filled with mundane updates and holiday planning, had split into two separate groups, those who supported my parents and those who supported me, or at least recognized the validity of my concerns. Through it all, I maintained a strange sense of calm. The hurricane was raging around me, but I was standing in its eye, finally free of the pretense that had suffocated me for so long. I continued going to work, teaching my students, coming home to Nathan, living my life. The difference was that I was no longer carrying the weight of unspoken hurt and resentment. I had named it, exposed it to light, and in doing so, begun to heal from it. A week after my post, I received an unexpected visitor. Uncle David, my father's younger brother, had flown in from Seattle without telling anyone in the family. He showed up at my door on a Saturday morning, suitcase in hand. "I hope it's okay that I came," he said somewhat awkwardly when I opened the door. "I thought you might need some family in your corner right now." I hadn't seen Uncle David in person since my wedding 3 years earlier. Growing up, he had been a peripheral figure, the black sheep brother who had chosen to become an artist rather than joining the family business. My father rarely spoke about him except to make occasional disparaging comments about his impractical lifestyle. We spent the weekend really talking, about family patterns, about the damage caused by favoritism, about the courage it takes to break cycles of emotional neglect. Uncle David shared stories about his own childhood that mirrored my experiences in ways that were both validating and heartbreaking. "Your grandfather did the same to your father and me," he explained as we walked through a nearby park. "Dad was the golden child, the one who would carry on the family name and business. I was the disappointment, the dreamer, the one who couldn't be counted on. The sad thing is, your father is just repeating what was done to him, but from the other side. So why didn't he recognize it and do better?" I asked, the question that had been haunting me for years. Uncle David sighed. "Because admitting the pattern would mean admitting that what was done to me was wrong. And that would unravel everything he's built his identity around, being the deserving son, the successful one, the one who made all the right choices. It's easier to perpetuate the myth than to face the truth." As Uncle David prepared to leave on Sunday evening, he hugged me tightly. "You've done something important, Olivia. Not just for yourself, but maybe for the whole family. It won't be easy, and some relationships might never recover, but speaking the truth was the right thing to do." After he left, I sat down at my laptop again. The original post had garnered thousands of reactions and comments by now, far beyond anything I had anticipated. People from all walks of life were sharing their own experiences with family favoritism, the damage it had caused, and in some cases, how they had healed from it. I wrote a follow-up post, not to escalate the situation, but to reflect on what had happened since my initial sharing. A week ago, I wrote about a lifetime of feeling less than in my own family. I didn't expect the post to reach beyond those directly involved, but it seems to have touched a nerve for many people with similar experiences. I want to be clear, my goal was never to punish my parents or sister, but to finally acknowledge a painful reality I've spent years pretending didn't exist. For those who've reached out with support and shared their own stories, thank you. You've helped me feel less alone. For those who think I should have kept this private, I understand your perspective, but I respectfully disagree. Some patterns thrive in silence and can only be broken when exposed to light. As I hit post on this second message, I felt a sense of closure beginning to form. Whatever happened next with my family, reconciliation, permanent estrangement, or something in between, I had taken the first step toward healing by finally speaking my truth. Wow, I can't believe how intense this family drama has become. I'd love to know what you think about Olivia's decision to make her feelings public. Was it the right move, or should she have kept trying to address things privately? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you're finding this story of family favoritism and standing up for yourself relatable, please hit that like button and subscribe to see more content about navigating complicated family dynamics. The story is about to take some unexpected turns as we see how this family confrontation ultimately resolves. You won't want to miss what happens next. 3 weeks after my Facebook post, the initial tsunami of reactions had settled into a steady, uncomfortable new reality. My parents had maintained their silence toward me, communicating only through other family members. Melissa had moved from anger to a calculated form of damage control, reaching out to relatives who had expressed support for me with her own version of our family history. What I hadn't anticipated was how the public nature of the conflict would force people to choose sides, and how surprising some of those choices would be. My cousin Jennifer, who had always been closer to Melissa, showed up at my apartment one evening with a bottle of wine and years of her own resentments to share. I never said anything because, well, Aunt Linda and Uncle Robert are scary when they're disappointed in you, she admitted as we sat at my kitchen table. But I saw it, Liv. Everyone did. The way they'd light up when Melissa entered a room and barely acknowledge when you did. It wasn't right. My high school best friend Alyssa, whom I drifted apart from after college, sent a heartfelt email. I remember coming to your house for your 16th birthday, and your mom spent the whole time talking about Melissa's internship. I wanted to say something then, but didn't know how. I'm sorry I wasn't a better friend when you needed one. On the flip side, my mother's sister, Aunt Carol, who had initially expressed sympathy privately, publicly aligned herself with my parents after a weekend visit to their home. Family loyalty should come before public validation, she wrote in a comment on my follow-up post. Olivia has always had a flair for drama. Linda and Robert may not be perfect parents, but they don't deserve this humiliation. The most painful betrayal came from my childhood friend Grace, who had been like a sister to me growing up. She and Melissa had never been particularly close, which made her public defense of my sister all the more shocking. Having known the Chin family for over 20 years, I can say with confidence that Olivia's account is grossly exaggerated. Melissa worked harder, aimed higher, and quite frankly, was easier to parent. Some children demand more attention, others create drama when they don't receive it. The comment felt like a physical blow. Grace had been there for so many of the incidents I'd described. She had witnessed the disparities firsthand, had comforted me through tears more times than I could count. Her public invalidation of my experience was a betrayal I hadn't seen coming. When I called to ask why she had taken such a stance, her response was coldly pragmatic. Your parents have connections I need for my business, Olivia. I can't afford to alienate them right now. I'm sure you understand. I didn't understand. I couldn't understand choosing professional advancement over basic human decency and truth. We ended the call with the clear understanding that our friendship was over. But for every betrayal, there seemed to be an unexpected ally. Richard, Melissa's fiancé, continued to reach out despite being caught in an impossible position between his loyalty to his future wife and his sense of right and wrong. I'm trying to help Melissa see things from your perspective, he texted one evening. It's not easy, she's been conditioned her whole life to see the family dynamic as normal. But I think cracks are starting to form in her certainty. The most surprising support came from my father's mother, my grandmother Chin, who had always been a formidable and somewhat distant figure in our lives. She called me directly, something she had never done before a month after my initial post. Olivia, she said, her accent still strong despite decades in America, I read what you wrote. My heart sank. Grandma Chin was traditional to her core. I braced myself for a lecture about respect and family harmony. You were brave to say these things, she continued, surprising me. Your grandfather did the same to your father and his brother. I tried to stop it, but... She sighed heavily. In my generation, wives did not challenge husbands on such matters. You knew? I asked, stunned by this revelation. Of course I knew. A mother always knows when her child is hurting another. I have watched history repeat itself with you and Melissa. I should have spoken sooner. The conversation with my grandmother shifted something fundamental in my understanding of our family dynamic. This wasn't just about me and Melissa, or even about my parents' individual choices. This was a generational pattern, a toxic inheritance passed down through the family line. Meanwhile, the practical consequences of my speaking out continued to unfold. My parents canceled the down payment they had promised to contribute to Melissa and Richard's new house, Apparently, financial support was suddenly less available than it had been before the family crisis. Melissa was furious, blaming me for the change in circumstances. "Are you happy now?" she demanded during a rare phone call. "Mom and Dad are so stressed about this whole situation they're pulling back on everything. You've ruined my wedding and now my house too. I didn't ask them to punish you," I pointed out. "That's their choice, and honestly, it just proves my point about how they use money to control people." The conversation deteriorated from there, ending with Melissa hanging up on me after declaring that she would never forgive me for destroying the family. Richard called the next day to apologize for Melissa's outburst. "She's struggling," he explained. "For the first time in her life, she's not getting exactly what she wants from your parents, and she doesn't know how to handle it." "And how are you handling it?" I asked, genuinely curious about why he was still reaching out to me despite Melissa's obvious anger. There was a long pause. "I love Melissa," he said finally. "But what I've seen over the past few weeks has made me question whether I want your parents as my in-laws. The way they manipulate situations, the conditional nature of their support, it's not healthy. Be careful," I warned him. "If you start pointing these things out to Melissa, you might find yourself on the outside too." "Maybe that wouldn't be the worst thing," he replied, leaving me to wonder if there was trouble in paradise beyond the family drama I had initiated. As spring turned to summer, the immediate crisis began to settle into a new normal. My parents maintained their distance, communicating only through intermediaries. Melissa and I exchanged occasional terse texts, but nothing more. The extended family had largely chosen sides, with holiday gatherings promising to be complicated affairs for years to come. Nathan, my rock throughout the ordeal, finally expressed the concern he'd been holding back. "Are you okay with how things have turned out?" he asked one evening as we sat on our small balcony, watching the sunset. "With potentially not having your parents in your life anymore?" I considered the question carefully. "I'm sad about it," I admitted. "I wish they could have responded differently, with reflection instead of defense, with a willingness to acknowledge the pattern and try to change it. But I'm not sorry I spoke up." "And Melissa?" "That's harder," I said, feeling the familiar ache when I thought about my sister. "We were never close the way sisters in movies are, but she's still my only sibling. I hope someday she'll be able to see things more clearly, but I'm not holding my breath." What I didn't tell Nathan, what I barely admitted to myself, was that beneath this sadness and resignation was a growing sense of liberation. For the first time in my life, I wasn't contorting myself to fit into the role of grateful second daughter in the Chin family drama. I wasn't swallowing hurt to keep the peace. I wasn't pretending that things were fine when they weren't. I was simply living my truth, painful as it was. And there was an unexpected power in that. 6 months after my Facebook post upended our family dynamic, I received a text from Richard asking to meet for coffee alone. By this point, he and Melissa had officially postponed their wedding indefinitely, and rumors were circulating through the family grapevine that their relationship was on shaky ground. We arranged to meet at a cafe halfway between my apartment and his office, a neutral location where we were unlikely to run into any mutual acquaintances. When I arrived, Richard was already there, fidgeting nervously with his coffee cup. "Thanks for coming," he said as I sat down. "I know this puts you in an awkward position." "Pretty much everything about the last 6 months has been awkward," I replied with a wry smile. "What's going on, Richard? Is this about you and Melissa?" He shook his head. "Not directly. It's about something I found, something I think you should see." He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, and then handed it to me. On the screen was an email from my father to Richard, dated 3 years earlier, right around the time Richard and Melissa had started dating seriously. The subject line read, "Welcome to the family," but the content was far from welcoming. "Richard, I've been impressed with your career trajectory and family connections. Melissa has made an excellent choice in you, and I anticipate a mutually beneficial relationship between our families moving forward. As Melissa's father, I want to be transparent about family matters. You should know that while both my daughters will inherit from my estate, the distribution will not be equal. Melissa will receive the majority share of both the business and personal assets, as she has demonstrated the commitment and capability to build upon what her mother and I have created. Olivia has chosen a different path that does not contribute to the family legacy. I trust you understand the business logic of this decision and will maintain appropriate discretion on the matter. Robert Chin. I read the email twice, my hands shaking slightly. He told you this before you were even engaged? That I was essentially being disinherited? Richard nodded grimly. I never mentioned it to Melissa. I assumed she knew already, and honestly, at the time, I didn't question it much. Your father presented it as a simple business decision, and I was focused on building my relationship with the family. Why are you showing me this now? I asked, handing the phone back to him. He sighed heavily. Because after everything that's happened, I started looking back at all my interactions with your parents with new eyes. This email was the first red flag I should have seen. The way your father commodified his own children, assigning different values to you based on how useful he deemed you to be to the family legacy. That's how he's always seen us, I said quietly. As extensions of himself, not as individuals with our own dreams and needs. There's more, Richard said, looking uncomfortable. After your post went viral, your father called me in for a private meeting. He wanted me to publicly discredit you, to use my standing in the community, to suggest you were exaggerating or emotionally unstable. I felt the blood drain from my face. And did you? No, he said firmly. That's when I knew I had to take a step back from the whole situation. From Melissa too, if I'm being honest. She expected me to fall in line with the family narrative, and when I wouldn't. She turned on you too, I finished for him. He nodded sadly. She's been conditioned her whole life to maintain the family image at all costs. I don't think she knows how to question it, even when it hurts people she cares about. We sat in silence for a moment, both processing the implications of what he had shared. Finally, I spoke. Thank you for showing me this. It shouldn't surprise me, it confirms what I've always felt, but seeing it spelled out so clearly. I trailed off, unsure how to articulate the strange mix of vindication and grief I was feeling. There's one more thing, Richard said, hesitating. Your father has been having financial problems for at least the past year. The business isn't doing as well as everyone thinks. This was genuinely surprising. My parents had always projected an image of unwavering success and financial security. How do you know? He approached me about investing substantially in the company. When I asked to see the books before committing, he got defensive. I did some digging through public records and industry contacts. Richard leaned forward, lowering his voice. Olivia, they're leveraged to the hilt. The big house, the country club membership, Melissa's extravagant wedding plans, it's all a facade. They've been borrowing against the business to maintain their lifestyle. I sat back stunned. Does Melissa know? Richard shook his head. I tried to tell her, but she accused me of trying to drive a wedge between her and her parents. That was pretty much the beginning of the end for us. As I walked home from the cafe, my mind was reeling from these revelations. The email confirmed what I had always suspected, that my parents had explicitly valued Melissa over me, to the point of planning to continue the disparity even after their deaths. But the financial information added a new dimension to the family dynamic. Were my parents' lavish gifts to Melissa part of maintaining a prestigious image they could no longer afford? Was their comparative stinginess with me less about favoring her and more about allocating limited resources to the child who would most effectively project the image they wanted to present to the world? It didn't make their behavior any less hurtful, but it did add a layer of complexity to my understanding of it. My parents weren't just favoring Melissa, they were investing in the carefully curated image of success that they had built their identities around. And in their eyes, I, with my teaching career and modest lifestyle, simply wasn't a good return on investment. When I got home, I called Uncle David to share what I had learned. I'm not surprised about the financial troubles, he said after I filled him in. Your father has always lived beyond his means, another trait he inherited from our father. The appearance of success has always been more important to him than actual financial security. Should I tell Melissa? I asked, genuinely uncertain about my obligations in this situation. Uncle David was silent for a moment. That's a tough one. On the one hand, she deserves to know the truth about the family finances, especially if she's making life decisions based on expectations of support that may not materialize. On the other hand, given how she's responded to your truth-telling so far, she'll shoot the messenger, I finished. Probably, he agreed. But that doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't send the message. After much consideration, I decided to forward Richard's email to Melissa with a brief note. I thought you should see this. Whatever our differences, you deserve to know how Dad really sees both of us. I'm not sharing this to hurt you, but because I think we've both been manipulated in different ways. Melissa's response came 3 days later, not via text or email, but on my doorstep. I opened the door to find my sister standing there, her eyes red from crying, looking more vulnerable than I had seen her since we were children. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice hoarse. I stepped aside wordlessly, still processing the shock of seeing her there. She entered my apartment, glancing around as if seeing it for the first time. In truth, she had rarely visited my home, usually insisting that family gatherings happen at our parents' house or at restaurants of her choosing. "Richard and I broke up," she said abruptly, sitting down on my couch. "He kept pushing me to see the truth about Mom and Dad. I couldn't handle it on top of everything else." I sat across from her, maintaining a careful emotional distance. "I'm sorry about Richard." She nodded, staring at her hands. "The email you sent." I confronted Dad about it. He didn't even deny it. He said it was just practical estate planning and that I shouldn't be upset about being the preferred beneficiary. She looked up at me, her expression pained. "But I am upset, Olivia. Not about getting more, about the way he talked about you. Like you were, defective somehow. A disappointment." It was the first time Melissa had ever acknowledged, even indirectly, the disparity in how we had been treated. I felt a knot in my throat but remained silent, letting her continue. "And then he started going on about how I needed to step up now that the wedding was off, about my responsibilities to the family name. It was like he wasn't even seeing me as a person who was hurting, just as an asset that wasn't performing as expected. That's how he's always seen both of us," I said quietly. "Just in different ways." Melissa was quiet for a long moment. "I didn't want to believe your Facebook post," she finally said. "It was easier to think you were just jealous or dramatic. Because if what you wrote was true..." She trailed off, then continued in a smaller voice. "If what you wrote was true, then I've been complicit in something really wrong. And I've lost my sister because of it." The raw honesty in her voice cracked something open inside me. A door I had thought permanently closed. "You haven't lost me," I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. "We've never had the relationship we should have had, but that doesn't mean we can't build something different now." Melissa looked up, hope and skepticism warring in her expression. "How? After everything that's happened?" "By starting with the truth," I said simply. "All of it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. No more pretending. No more family mythology. Just two adult sisters trying to figure out what kind of relationship we actually want with each other, separate from our parents' influence." It wasn't an instant reconciliation. There were too many years of hurt, too many ingrained patterns to overcome in a single conversation. But it was a beginning, the first genuine conversation Melissa and I had ever had about our shared experiences as Robert and Linda Chen's daughters. As Melissa was preparing to leave, she paused at the door. "I don't know what happens next," she admitted. "With Mom and Dad, with us, with any of it." "Neither do I replied honestly. "But whatever it is, it'll be based on truth, not pretense. And that's something." She nodded slowly. "Maybe that's everything." 1 year after my Facebook post changed everything, I stood in my classroom after the last bell, packing up my things for the summer break. It had been a good year professionally, my students had shown impressive growth, and I had been selected to lead a district-wide curriculum development initiative for the following year. The irony wasn't lost on me that as my relationship with my biological family had fractured, my career, the very thing my parents had dismissed as unambitious, was flourishing. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. "Don't forget, dinner at 7. Special occasion." I smiled, puzzled but intrigued. Nathan wasn't usually one for surprises or special occasions without obvious reasons. It wasn't our anniversary or either of our birthdays. Perhaps he had received good news about the science department chairmanship he had applied for. When I arrived home, the apartment was filled with the scent of my favorite meal, Nathan's homemade lasagna, a labor-intensive dish he usually saved for significant celebrations. The table was set with our good dishes, the ones we had received as wedding gifts and rarely used. "What's going on?" I asked as I set down my bags. "Did you get the chairmanship?" Nathan grinned, handing me a glass of wine. "No, but that's still pending. This is about something else entirely. We have guests coming." Before I could ask who, there was a knock at the door. Nathan nodded encouragingly, and I went to answer it, completely unprepared for who I found on the other side. Melissa stood there, looking nervous but determined. Behind her was a tall, slender man I didn't recognize. "Hey, Liv," she said, shifting awkwardly from foot to foot. "This is Alex. My, therapist." I blinked in surprise. Melissa had never been one to seek therapy. She had always subscribed to our parents' view that mental health support was for weak people who couldn't solve their own problems. "It's nice to meet you, Olivia," Alex said, extending his hand. "Melissa has told me a lot about you." "All bad, I'm sure," I joked weakly, stepping aside to let them in. "Actually, no," he replied with a gentle smile. "Quite the opposite lately." The dinner that followed was unlike any family gathering I had ever experienced. There was an initial awkwardness, certainly Nathan and I on one side of the table, Melissa and Alex on the other, all of us navigating unfamiliar terrain. But as the meal progressed, something remarkable happened. We had an honest conversation. Alex, it turned out, wasn't just there as Melissa's therapist, but as a facilitator for a conversation she wanted to have with me. With his guidance, Melissa did something I never thought I'd witness. She apologized. "I've been doing a lot of work with Alex," she explained, her voice steady despite the obvious emotion behind it. Looking at patterns, understanding how I was shaped by mom and dad's expectations, recognizing the role I played in the family dynamic. "And I need to tell you that I'm sorry, Olivia. I'm sorry for every time I accepted preferential treatment at your expense. I'm sorry for dismissing your feelings when you tried to talk about it. I'm sorry for believing I somehow deserved more than you did." I sat in stunned silence, the lasagna forgotten on my plate. "You don't have to forgive me right away," Melissa continued when I didn't immediately respond. "Or ever, really. But I needed you to know that I see it now, all of it. And I'm working to be different." Alex gently guided us through the conversation that followed about our childhood, about the Christmas card incident that had been the final straw, about the year of family upheaval that had followed my decision to speak out. He helped us navigate the difficult emotions that arose, ensuring that both of us felt heard without allowing the discussion to devolve into blame or defensiveness. By the time we reached dessert, a store-bought cheesecake that Nathan had picked up, knowing I'd be too tired to bake after a full day of teaching, something had shifted between Melissa and me. It wasn't complete healing, but it was a step toward something new, something potentially stronger than the superficial sister relationship we had maintained for most of our lives. "What about mom and dad?" I finally asked the question that had been hovering over the conversation. "Have you talked to them about any of this?" Melissa's expression clouded. "I've tried. Multiple times. She glanced at Alex, who nodded encouragingly. "They're not in a place where they can acknowledge their role in this. Dad is still focused on the disrespect of your post going public. Mom alternates between playing the victim and pretending nothing significant happened. They've lost a lot this year, I observed. Their carefully constructed family image, their control over both of us, their planned merger with Richard's family. And the business, Melissa added quietly. They had to sell it 3 months ago. The financial problems were worse than anyone realized. They've downsized to a condo and resigned from the country club. I absorbed this information, surprised by my lack of satisfaction at their reversal of fortune. A year ago, I might have felt a vindictive pleasure in knowing that their facade of perfection had finally crumbled. Now, I just felt sad for them, trapped in patterns too deeply ingrained to break, unable to prioritize genuine family relationships over appearances, even when everything else was falling apart. Are they okay? Financially, I asked, realizing that despite everything, I didn't want my parents to suffer. Melissa nodded. They'll be fine. The business sold for enough to secure their retirement, just not the lavish one they had planned. It's more the loss of status that's killing them slowly. As the evening wound down, Melissa and I made tentative plans to meet again the following week, just the two of us this time, maybe for a walk in the park or a simple lunch. Small steps toward a new kind of sister relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than comparative value. After they left, Nathan helped me clear the dishes, giving me space to process the unexpected evening. "Are you okay?" he asked as we loaded the dishwasher. I considered the question carefully. I think I am. It's all still complicated, but tonight felt important. He smiled, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "I'm proud of you, you know, for speaking your truth last year and for being open to healing now. Both take incredible courage." That night, as I lay in bed reflecting on the journey of the past year, I realized something profound. The act of speaking out, of refusing to maintain the family fiction any longer, had not only freed me from a lifetime of feeling less than, but had created the possibility for genuine connection with my sister. By breaking the toxic pattern, I had made space for something healthier to potentially grow in its place. I still didn't know what would happen with my parents. Perhaps someday they would be ready for an honest conversation, would be able to see the damage their favoritism had caused and take responsibility for it. Perhaps not. What I did know was that I was no longer defining my worth through their eyes. The following weekend, I met Melissa at a small cafe halfway between our homes. Without the structure of Alex's therapy session, there were more awkward pauses, more moments where old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. But there was also laughter, genuine laughter, as we shared stories from our lives that had nothing to do with our parents or the family drama. As we were preparing to leave, Melissa hesitated, then pulled a small wrapped package from her bag. "It's not a special occasion or anything," she said, pushing it across the table toward me. "I just saw this and thought of you." I unwrapped it to find a beautiful leather-bound journal, the cover embossed with a simple tree design. "You always loved writing, even when we were kids," Melissa explained. "I remember you kept diaries and wrote stories. Mom and Dad never really encouraged it because it wasn't practical, but I always thought you were really good." It was such a small thing, an inexpensive gift, a simple acknowledgement of something I had loved that our parents had dismissed. Yet it represented something monumental, Melissa seeing me as an individual, not just as her less favored sister. "Thank you," I said, running my fingers over the soft leather. "This means a lot." We parted with a somewhat awkward hug, still finding our way in this new territory of genuine sisterhood. As I walked home, journal in hand, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for most of my life. The journey wasn't over. There would be more difficult conversations, more moments of healing and hurt as Melissa and I navigated our new relationship. There was still the unresolved situation with our parents, who continued to maintain their distance, unable or unwilling to acknowledge the patterns that had damaged our family. But for the first time, I was facing these challenges from a position of authenticity rather than pretense. I had spoken my truth, weathered the storm that followed, and emerged stronger for it. The $2 Christmas card had been a breaking point, but it had broken something that needed breaking, a facade of family harmony that had masked deep dysfunction. As I opened the journal that evening and put pen to paper, I began to write not just about the past year, but about the future I was now free to create, a future based on genuine connections, honest communications, and the radical act of valuing myself regardless of others' assessments. The truth, I wrote on the first page, even when painful, is always the path to healing. Wow, what an incredible journey we've just shared together. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming along on this emotional roller coaster with me. If you've ever experienced family favoritism or had to stand up for yourself in a difficult situation, I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. What would you have done in Olivia's situation? Do you think family karma eventually comes around, or do we need to create our own justice sometimes? If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help others find it too. And if you want to see more stories about family dynamics, standing up for yourself, and finding your authentic voice, subscribe to my channel. I post new content every week exploring the complicated, messy, beautiful reality of family relationships and personal growth. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that they deserve to be valued, even when their family doesn't show it. And remember, sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is simply speak your truth. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.